All right, now we're recording. So I'm Brookelyn Palin, and it is my pleasure to introduce Representative Tom Welch. Representative Welch is the representative for District 72, which is Dillon or the Beaverhead County area, and he has kindly agreed to talk to us about the marijuana-related bills that are in the Montana State Legislature today. So Representative Welch, if you want to go ahead and give a little background on yourself.
You bet. As Brookelyn said, I represent Beaverhead County and actually a little bit of Butte Silver Bow County as well. My district is 6,000 square miles in size. It's the third or fourth largest district in the state of Montana House District, so big area to cover. This is my third legislative session. Prior to becoming a legislator, I worked in banking, community banking for 43 years. Retired a couple 3 years ago. Was already in the legislature for the working in the legislature for part of that last part of my career. But I've been a legislator. This is my third term in the Montana House. All three terms I've served on the Human Services Committee as well as the Tax Committee. This particular term, I am the Vice Chair of Tax, and Tax Committee is dealing with the marijuana bills. So we'll visit a little bit about that.
Cool, thank you so much. So the first step of the policy analysis I wanted to talk about was problem and issue identification. So Representative Welch, what are some of the problems with these marijuana bills that you've seen, and how have these problems affected the successfulness of the bills?
As people probably remember, there was a voter initiative that put in the recreational marijuana bills. And those bills passed with, if I remember right, a 57 to 43% margin in the state of Montana. So the legislature then was, as part of the initiative, was placed with the responsibility of putting into place the rules, the regulations, and everything else that go along with recreational marijuana. Certainly, we've had medical marijuana in Montana the last few years, but this is a whole different ballgame. It just opens everything up wide. The initiative itself talked about how some of the money was to be spent. One of the issues that we run into there is that only the legislature can determine how money is spent. And that's in the Montana Constitution. So a lot of people who didn't care one way or the other about recreational marijuana voted for it, saying, oh, well, yeah, it's going to help parks and trails. The money's going here, the money's going there. That was not the case because only the Montana legislature, specifically the House of Representatives, can appropriate money. So that's the first issue we're dealing with. We've got people who have preconceived notions that we've got to spend money here, we have to spend it there because it was in the initiative. That's not the case. So we've been dealing with that. Montana House decided to do something a little unique with the bills, and we've had a number of bills, but there's been three major bills. House Bill 670 by Derek Skees out of the Flathead, House Bill 701 by Mike Hopkins out of Missoula, which is actually the main bill, if you will, I think, by the time we get done, and then the House Bill 707 by Brad Cheetah out of Missoula. But the House decided to let the Business and Labor Committee deal with all of the policy part, but send the tax part and the revenue part and how the money's being spent and all of that over to the Tax Committee. So both committees this last week have been working on that, and this week in tax, we heard all three bills, House Bill 670, 701, and 707. I will tell you that 701 is 150 pages long, I think it is, very detailed. So we're starting, well, we're not starting, we're well into that process. Actually voted on the bills on Friday, today's Friday, on Thursday, I guess was yesterday. We voted on the bills and are moving three of those bills forward, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Thank you, Representative Welch. My second step I decided to do was policy implementation. So how are these marijuana bills going to be implemented, and who's involved in the implementation? Who is benefiting and who's losing?
Great question, because the implementation I mean, we talked a little bit about tax. So obviously we got the Department of Revenue involved. We got the Department of Public Health and Human Services involved. We got the Department of Labor, Industry involved. So there are a lot of state departments involved in this, all the way up to the governor's office and the legislature. So our goal is to have something implemented by January of this coming January, so 8 months from now, January 1st of 2022. We're hopeful that we can stay on course and get that done. I mean, obviously, when you have a pot of money, there's a lot of people looking for a piece of that pot, and so we're working at trying to ensure that, part of the money we certainly want to go for people with substance abuse problems. I mean, that's part of what we're talking about, and the governor has a strong view on that right now. And we agree with him, or a majority of us do, that that's important that we look at that. You talk about winners and losers and stuff. I mean, this is new revenue to the state, so certainly we're looking at, can we spend some of it on outdoor recreation? Spend some of it on education. We're certainly going to spend some on healthcare, those type of things. So I think in the long run that will work, but none of us really know. Plus, we're talking about how do we monitor it? How do we, tax it? What's the tax? We've heard taxes on it all the way from 5% up to 20%. The other thing we have to deal with, quite honestly, is the black market. And if we price it too high and tax it too high, then people are going to go, hey, instead of walking by the dispensary on Main Street, I'm going to walk down to the alley and buy it. There's no tax, there's no nothing. So, I mean, realistically, we talk about those types of things. We're trying to figure out what all that is. Losers in the thing, I mean, probably maybe some of those people who thought in the initiative process that money was going to go to their particular group and a certain amount of money. I mean, that may happen, but likely probably not matching the numbers they thought. Other losers, I mean, maybe society as a whole, but we look around, there's a lot of states around Montana that already have recreational marijuana. Another problem I will tell you about, because of my previous background, is that banking does not allow for banking marijuana money. That's federal law. That's not a state law, that's a federal law. All financial institutions have federal insurance, FDIC, for example, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. They cannot bank that money. So then all of a sudden we have it's all cash. It's a lot of cash, folks, we're talking about. So there's a lot of issues that we're dealing with there. So that issue, I mean, the state cannot address that federal issue on banking, and that's being looked at, but that's another potential problem. And losers may be the banking system. They may not be able to bank it. All of a sudden, we've got all this cash running around. It's going to be crazy.
Well, thank you so much, because you've answered a lot of my classmates and even my questions, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for being willing to do this for us, Representative Welch.
I'm glad to. Good luck, and thank you for asking me.
Thank you. Hi, guys. I'm going to be talking about my alternative policy. So to begin with, I really see this whole marijuana-related bill thing to be kind of overwhelming. It just has so much content and contention that it's just kind of hard to wrap your head around, and there's so many parts and pieces that is just really hard to understand. So personally, I think that the selling point of the initiative for marijuana to begin with was that they were going to set aside tax revenue for public lands. I think that Montana and their constituencies should be listened to, and it should be interpreted in the language of a bill. It should be interpreted in the implementation of a policy. I think that right now there's just too much polarization within in our nation, but even in the Montana state legislature, that it's hard to get the voters' voice out on paper. It's more so about whose party has more power. How are we going to implement different tax revenues? How are we going to allocate those tax revenues to different parts of the state economy and the different sectors to make more money? And I genuinely think that that's what's going on right now, which isn't a bad idea. I personally think it's not a bad idea to put tax revenue towards different sectors, but I think that public land should be one of those sectors. If not a large majority of the tax revenue should be put towards that, because that's why voters voted for it to begin with. A lot of people, like Representative Welch mentioned, voted for that initiative without even using marijuana. They voted for it because it was planned that the tax revenue was going to be allocated towards public lands, recreation, and other things like that. Being a fisherman and hunter, I definitely would love to see my public lands have a little bit more of hype and get a little bit more tax revenue so we can better our public lands and conservation. But I see also the other side, like Representative Welch was saying, how hard it is to make that happen. And I think that especially in a divisive world and state that we're in right now, it's hard. So my alternative policy and solution would be to listen to the voters, listen to constituency interests and values, and implement that in policy. Because we are a democracy for a reason, and that's what I would like to see happen. How hard is that to actually implement? I don't know. I'm not a legislator, but that's what I would like to see happen. So thank you everyone for watching, and I hope you all are doing well.